Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our Concepts Edition, episode 138. I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and ARDA. And today's quote, "Something is wrong if workers do not look around each day, find things that are tedious or boring, and then rewrite the procedures. Even last month's manuals should be out of date." From Taiichi Ono. That's scary.
Aspirational?
Yeah. I mean, very, very cool. I definitely am seeing the first part. That's an accomplishment. I don't know. I wouldn't underestimate the accomplishment there. We've been talking to a lot more companies, and most people do not have do not have regular continuous improvement activities across the business.
Yeah.
And mostly, leadership owns that role, even if it's around production, right? Like they come up with schemes that go frustrate the production floor because they're like, okay, you want me to do it this way now? I guess like there's a reason we're doing it this other way.
Yeah.
I think both steps are huge. We're definitely not out making our last month's manual out of date because we don't have a last month's manual. So fix that problem.
Taken care of.
No, I mean, this is, that's key. And I'm like more and more just like without standards, there is no improvement is like, so self-evident once you kind of think about it. It's kind of wild. We had an interesting conversation with a company last night, and they were running into sort of essentially quality issues. And it was just very and they wanted more data to figure out where quality issues were coming up in the form of software in ARDA. And it's interesting to figure out what customers may want so that we can account for those desires. But it's also interesting as a company, we don't want to like die on any hills. But on the flip side, I think it's really the wrong approach and won't be successful because like if it's an additional step that workers need to like log mistakes, if they're getting reprimanded because of that log, like they're going to come up with some really clever creative solution to not log them without like violating the rules. Yeah. Right. Like, oh, it's not a reject. I just restocked it on the shelf. Right. Or I don't know, but like, you're probably not going to get great data. Also, you're going to get incomplete data. So it won't even give you a full picture. Yeah. And it was just like, they're trying to gather, I think, and I hope, wish them success. Instead of reducing noise, kind of collecting enough data of the noise, they have no standardized, none, but for the most part, every day is creative and new. And so it's very hard to establish a baseline of like, how long should that thing take? Right. Yeah. Are we in like, you can't be out of standard if there is no standard. And so you can't go. And what's interesting is it sounds like, I mean, this is not surprising, but like all the things in the books about reducing WIP to expose problems. Yeah. It's such a complicated problem they're dealing with on the shop floor. I think the only way to gain visibility into where the weak spots are would be to reduce WIP until you're idling stations by previous stations messing up. Right. Because short of that, you'd have to go stand in the circle for a lot of hours before you could see signal. Because again, like if every single day or every hour is slightly different, or I guess it'll always be slightly different, but is like substantially, virtually a new set of parameters. Yeah. I just think that's very difficult.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it seems like a useful question in those situations is always like, what do you hope to achieve with that data and how do you plan to like execute? Because often I've found that exposes sort of whatever flaws are in the thinking often tend to come to the surface in that where you effectively kind of gaming it out a little bit.
Right. Okay, great. We get great data. What is that?
Right.
What are you going to do with it? And how do you, that's a great point.
And also maybe not just as a way to like shut people down, but cool creative solutions can come out of that discussion as well.
Totally. And I think, like, I guess the reason I brought it up due to, like, from this quote is it is a big leap forward as a company to empower your workers to actually fix problems, and the confidence, the difference that makes to the whole company. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so not a thing. Like, when they said it, I was sort of surprised, because to us, creating a reject is an opportunity, right? Like, legitimately. I mean, it's a bummer, but no one is afraid to be like, oh, hey, I'm like broke this thing, right? It's like, oh, interesting. Like, okay, why? What caused that? Like, what can we do differently? There's like an SOP, there's something. And like that trust, I think, is hard to build. Not hard, it just takes time and like
it is, yeah,
commitment that you're trying to improve people's working conditions and quality of the work. But yeah, I mean, we have a long way to go on the documented standards side.
Yeah. Conversely to that specific example, about reducing WIP, to find issues, I had this thought yesterday, half a thought really, but just that buffers, I think, are really the only way to create standardized work in a super highly variable environment.
Yeah.
And that's just starting to come to me with more and more clarity as we've sort of tried to plan out, like, there's a lot of friction, I think, in our shop of people just like not quite knowing what to do next. And we've talked about this before. Yeah. But every time someone new comes in, it becomes really evident again as there's a person that doesn't sort of see the overview with a lot of clarity. Mm-hmm. Which I think it's a good opportunity, because requiring that everyone sees that overview is sort of, I don't know, it's the part of, honestly, like, I enjoy big picture problem solving, mm-hmm. and simultaneously, like, carrying that overview in my head is what I hate about my job right now. And
interesting.
It's like, I want to come in and like do the things I'm good at, not be up at 3 a.m. thinking about the overview. Right. Like, there's a happy medium in somewhere mm-hmm. in there where you're developing processes, thinking about doing systems thinking, but being up in the middle of the night or in the middle of your workday going, okay, what is priority A? What's priority B in this individual moment? Yeah. It's not really a great use of people's time.
No, and it's tiring.
It is tiring. It's taxing. It's frustrating. It's not something you want to expect from everybody in the company. And just through one example of kind of, we have one person working half days right now. Okay. And so kind of figuring out how to like shuffle in their labor in the middle of the day, like considering these handoffs and how that will look. It was kind of like, okay, well, maybe we do this for the morning and then this person switches over to this other task midday. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I was like, okay, we're starting to like attempt to tackle standardized work at that point. But for that to work, we have to reduce the time sensitivity pressure from those tasks. And to do that, we have to have a buffer, because they're not all the same task. And some of them take a lot longer than others.
Yeah, interesting. I think that's right. I mean, that was my other thought with this company, is essentially the same, like buffer management and what the buffer tells you about the upstream and downstream process, like protecting a bottleneck process with a buffer makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know what that interplay is. And we've talked about like, is the point to run a business or is the point to eliminate waste? And the point is both, but mm-hmm. the leaner you run it, the more failures you're going to experience per unit time. Yeah. And if you guys can't fix those problems as a team, that's like the ultimate waste, maybe, is experiencing waste. Yeah. That you have no bandwidth for, right? Yeah. Or to fix. Yeah. I mean, so here's a thought that if we had a long conversation about like Kanban and priority, right? And like mm-hmm. the different strategies of dealing with that. And it occurred to me, which is an obvious thing, but it occurred to me that the same problem that we're applying to our CNC of like shifting priorities as time passes. Of like, say you have a bunch of stuff in the queue, where it should be in the queue is going to change moment to moment.
Yeah.
Maybe it shouldn't, and that's part of the picture, right?
You mean it's like real-time priority changes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Toyota's approach largely to this problem of one processing node, a human or a machine, that supplies many value chains, is to designate the ratio of each value stream it's touching, right? So it's like, we're going to do A, B, C, A, B, C, A, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or that was about it. Yeah. That would be A, B, C. Anyway. But it occurred to me, you could apply the same concept to people too, to say, and Toyota actually has this in their books, where it's like the operator is meant to go machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, machine 1, machine 2, machine 3. They're not saying go to machine 1, go like, okay, should I run this thing here or should I run over to machine 2 and get that one going because, well, that one's auto loaded, so I'm going, like, they just have set ratios. And I think what that implies is that the business has sort of set, like, and this is really tricky to establish, I think, but at least then once you establish it, you're running a test on that and you can tweak it. Like, again, without standards, there's no improvement, but like, theoretically, austere manufacturing has like, whatever, I don't know, 7 core functions. And they should all happen in some ratio, presumably, right?
Yep.
And like that assumes production leveling, because otherwise you're going to have a spike that just gets passed through from station to station.
Yep.
That feels also very synonymous with like 1-by-1 production, right? So like, I don't know how to square that circle, but theoretically then you should be able to specify like, hey, this employee is going to act on these value chains, and we know that for our company we need to do, 1 hour or whatever, 10 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 40 minutes here, 10, and that just circulates throughout the day, and that keeps up with all the loads. And if there's a problem and there's an and-on pull, that's an opportunity to maybe reevaluate that, bring in more work, streamline the thing that messed up, that threw the whole part, that whole. But it occurred to me, like, we have this problem big time in our shop, like thrash, like just running from thing to thing because not running. Fosha's listening.
You can't run in your shop. It's not big enough.
That's true. Also, we're changing that soon. Anyway, that's all. So like, curious if you.
Yeah, I think what I'm realizing is we just don't know what those ratios are.
Yeah, same. Yeah, and until you establish them without standards, there's no improvement. Without putting us saying like we're gonna do 1-1-2.
Yeah,
you're never gonna know, because every day it is going to change.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it's
and because then if you standardize that, also if you got accumulation on one task, you'd be like, oh, we're short-handed over here, so either we need to split this between things, or we need to add capacity to that function. It would start to really show you what the loads are.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just being in a constant state of.
I had the funny realization a minute ago too, that like I've been, telling you that you should increase your buffers over and over again. And I was like thinking about where we keep running out and how
that's so funny.
I have refused to increase that buffer.
We're lean.
I'm like,
That's funny.
Guess I should.
Where do you see buffers that need work in your business?
I think again it's sort of like between programming and the floor, and I think it has to do with it's sort of the cadence of like programming. Just fundamentally, it takes longer than a setup, generally speaking.
Okay.
And what's the issue here exactly? I think that's it. We can get into a situation where we have a decent buffer and then multiple setups might happen in about the same amount of time that it takes to program for one more stream, basically one more node. And then those other two have fallen behind.
Okay.
So I think we need more buffer there because we don't have quite enough signal into where that priority is, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Because it's binary basically. Right now it's on or off, and there's no sense of, okay, this is now turned on, but there's still some buffer to the queue, and we're going to see what happens next. Right. It's just like everything empties, and there's not a lot of information there on kind of how to move forward effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really interesting increasing our buffers. Definitely the easiest maybe thing to pull out of the lean books is less inventory. And I think we maybe over-indexed on less inventory as a like, look, we're winning or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, the analogy of like draining water out of the rocks, like I think I was maybe over eager to encounter the rocks and solve them. and really like
my boat has wheels.
Yeah, I mean, right. It was out of control.
Yeah.
And now we experience problems at a cadence that feels much more reasonable for the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we were like, oh, we ran into a problem. Not like, okay, which problem should we address today? There's a lot, and I don't know how they all interact, but
totally. Nice.
Yeah.
I had an interesting, just little Kanban exploration, attempting to implement Kanban in our kitchen at home. Not super well received.
Okay.
But interestingly, in my attempt to make it more well received, it broke a lot of rules.
Oh, cool.
And I think that was pretty illuminating into kind of like failure modes. So one of the initial rules I broke is like, well, there's lots of them. We're not having a two-bin system.
Yep.
Basically, in part because storage space.
Yep.
So we don't really have like a backup pantry, supermarket, quote unquote, in the house that we can pull things from.
Have the same
so
issue.
We don't have an effective buffer. Secondarily, for refrigerated items, that's sort of impractical for us with at least buying a second fridge, which I'm not interested in doing right now.
Right.
What that meant is that in order to have like sort of the information where you need it, when you need it,
yeah,
that would mean like having cards throughout the entire kitchen.
Yeah.
Which, while I do love the idea of efficiency and ease, I also care about having a kitchen that doesn't look like a workplace and isn't, and is pleasant to be in.
Yeah.
And so what it has ended up creating is a situation where effectively we're just working from a common list of items where you run out of something, you go over to the stack of cards and you shuffle through it till you find the correct card. And that has turned out to be remarkably tedious and not super effective.
I implemented in my kitchen a while back, and all these problems.
Yeah. Not having a searchable list is super problematic. Also, like, interestingly, for whatever reason, the index cards we got are remarkably hard to shuffle through.
Oh.
Like they just,
and you're not laminating them.
We're not laminating them, so they like don't stick to your fingers like cards do.
Interesting.
So your thumb just like slides on them. It's super aggravating.
Wow.
Yeah. So So the main kind of to like bring it home, without a two-bin system, I think Kanban falls flat on its face really fast.
I would amend that a little, but
yeah,
I would say what I've noticed is without it being very unambiguous when to trigger something, you lose a big portion of the mindlessness that Kanban allows for.
Yeah.
Right. Like it can be 2-bin, it can be 3-bin.
Sure. I guess what I mean is like without a backup stock buffer.
Yes.
Of some kind.
Yep.
And then not having searchable database or the cards with the item was the other like massive failure. And yeah, anyway, those are just kind of interesting take homes for anybody who's thinking about starting to apply it. Is I think it's one of those things where you kind of have to do the whole thing. And, and half measures really maybe don't
That's
work.
what I found. And then the further problem, so we do have a pantry that, and I think what I'm going to do is take the top half, and like anything on these shelves is Arda. Well, Kanban, right? Anything not on these shelves is not. Because the other thing I ran into is having a mix is like not useful, because then if you go to grab something, you're kind of like, oh, does this have a card? Not necessarily. So you're not necessarily even going to go rifle through a stack to look for it.
Yeah.
And then the last piece I would say is like, I think you can separate a few things. Kanban acts as a signal of when to order more. Once you eliminate the 2-bin system or something else, it loses that function, right? Because it's not going to tell you when to order more. You have to tell it when to order more. And then it's just a way of streamlining the, like, passing that information. And I think it can still be really useful. Like in our paint department, on a lot of our colors, because of the cadence we go through them and the shelf life of the paint, we don't order... We don't have enough. We don't have more than one bottle at a time on some of our lower consumption colors. And so there we do just have cards that are essentially on the front of the shelf. And so at any point you're like, this is a little low. I'm going to trigger this. Yeah. And it is still really useful. But there's a few things there. One, every single thing on that shelf is Kanban.
Yep.
So there's no ambiguity of like, oh, was there a card here? Was there not? You're just like, if the card's not here, it's been ordered. Yeah. And if the card is here and it's low, I should order it.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's very convenient.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
What I realized is it had effectively just become a standardized list. Yeah. Which is still useful, but once I realized that, I was like, this isn't an effective list.
Right on a whiteboard. Okay,
I want a list to pull from. I want a standardized list versus being like,
why?
Because it makes it much simpler if you're like preparing to go to the grocery store instead of doing a mental inventory against your mental
I see what you're saying.
Inventory.
Almost having a standard.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to go through and be like, bananas. Yes, we need bananas. Jam. Yes, we need jam. Versus being like, do we need things?
Do we need anything?
Think through the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I think that is valuable, but having a list of cards is not.
So the other function I've found to be useful, because I implemented Arda, which is searchable.
You implemented that in your kitchen.
Yeah. Is the other problem that I've run into, especially with like a whiteboard on the fridge, is then I get to the store and I'm like, I don't know what's on the whiteboard. It's at home. Yeah. Right. So like, I don't always go to the store. Like if I go to the store on the way home, I need to have that data
available,
and separating the gathering of the data from like when you're cooking, you don't want to do a lot of work to add it to a list that will perpetuate. Like there's shared lists. I don't know. A lot of people have tried to solve this problem. So are you abandoning it, or are you like, this is useful, but not quite like this?
We have not abandoned it yet. I suspect we haven't really got a chance to talk about it.
What if you had a long strip of steel with a bunch of essentially 3 columns? The left column was an item with an image, ideally. And then there was just like a binary magnet slider thing that was like, do we need this? Do we not need this? So you could just go push it over. Yeah. It could be in alphabetical order.
But then what do you do with that information?
Then you take all the tokens to the store. No, I don't know. That's a good point. So what are you doing now? Oh, you're actually taking the cards to the store.
Actually taking the cards,
cool.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Never mind. I suppose it could be magnets that were printed, so they were the card, and it would just be, or you could, simpler, a bunch of small cards that were, we don't need this, and then they're in alphabetical order, and then you just scoot it over till we need this, and when you go to the store, you grab all of them, or snap a photo. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. That's cool.
It is interesting. Yeah. I suspect we'll go probably back to a more classic list, but hopefully having some sort of like master list to pull from. And I'm not sure quite what that looks like yet.
Yeah. Yeah, because there is some use to just saying like, we don't want to run out of all of these items. The rest, like there's a lot of stuff you're going to buy sometimes. Like,
that was the other failure mode. Yeah. Is like, whatever, once, you can have an exhaustive list, But there's like you're going to have some people over for dinner. You're going to make some special meal.
Totally.
You need, I don't know, like
get bougie and buy chanterelle mushrooms. It's like we don't always
or
perishables
some weird paste or something
yeah.
for Asian food, and that was the other thing that's
right. And then if you don't know if it should be on the list, then you're kind of like, then it's something not like if you take that wad of Kanbans of things you do need to the store and it's not exhaustive.
Yeah, then you end up having a secondary list anyway.
Yeah, which can still be helpful.
I think
and also it's really irritating to run out of the stuff you don't like running out of.
Yeah.
Not having the paste is sort of annoying in a different way, but less like, wait, seriously, we're out of like aluminum foil or we're out of
toilet paper?
Toilet paper, yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
It's not in the kitchen.
Yeah. Okay, I have... we're preparing to move. I spent 6-8 hours just going through the shop, essentially 3S'ing, but for 8 hours. And it was so productive and like easy, and like it was properly kind of beating the mess back, not just like sweeping, not cleaning, but like, what is this doing here?
Right.
This, we don't use this, or we do and it should go over here, or there was a lot of stuff that I was like, this is trash, or this is giveaway, or like, we do not use it. It's just sitting here. And at the end of the day, it was it was awesome. I'm glad I did it. It's definitely re-energized my, like, I don't know. I really need to get better at doing that on a consistent basis. Cause I was kind of looking at it like, okay, so you divide out 8 hours across the 3 years we've been 3-4 years producing in that space. That amounts to like what, 5 minutes? I mean, a few minutes a day. And so we could always be operating in those like delightful, clear conditions.
Yeah.
Like clear work surfaces, right? Like they're not cluttered. They're just clear. And I can either do the work after struggling with the mess, or I can put that time in preemptively, and the time spent is the same. It's just one, I don't get to work in a really nice, easy environment, and I'm like making more defects because I don't have places to put stuff down. Anyway, so it's kind of frustrating in that way, but also very energizing, and like we need to do a better job of building that into our regular. And it's so easy. I think the lazy way of cleaning is like sometimes how I fall into like, okay, well, I'll sweep, right? That will improve things. And that's like reducing the dirt. Great.
Right.
We shouldn't not sweep, but you're now sweeping around an extra chair that you brought in because you had another person in your office. Mm-hmm. And now that chair just becomes like a fixture of the space that you walk around every time. Yeah. And it's like, why? Like, no, that goes back in the, wherever that chair came from. And very likely that chair doesn't actually have a place.
Right.
Right. And so it does just float. And then that's a separate issue, which I think is where the whole like very visual workspace comes in, of like tape on the floor marking where things should be. It's also telling you things shouldn't be. Right. Right. So anyway. Yeah. Yeah. It was good. I mean, it was good on a lot of fronts. One was just like a real slap in the face of like, okay, you just spent 8 hours to get a thing that you could have had this whole time if you had just amortized that over every day. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we're making progress with our Kamishibai board, but it's interesting, the mental, like there's the Kamishibai board stuff, and that stuff happens. And then there's the stuff kind of like what you're talking about that's not on the board. Yeah. And usually doesn't get put up as like a to-do item on our like whatever general to-do list. Like moving the random chair, right? Like that's not a situation where we're going to have a Kamishibai item for like, go find that chair, right? Because you do it once and it's done. And it's also probably not something that you would see. I guess what I'm trying to get at is learning to see that stuff is tricky. Yeah, I'm terrible at it. Ask my wife. Right. Point of contention. So like I do want to improve it. One thought I had, and I don't know, I wonder if it would be a favor to the team if I was just more of a hard ass about it. Because in a funny way, it's easy to get lazy for myself, like not speaking for other people. And if you know that it's going to become a problem, it's kind of like, oh, I don't like, you no longer have to decide whether you want to take the time to neaten up your workspace.
Right.
Right. And you hear about like Toyota and the audits that they go through where it's like opening all your desk drawers. And if stuff is out of order, it's like, oh, what's going on here? And like going through your file structure.
That's terrifying.
It's terrifying. It's sort of Big Brother. It's sort of, but I think part of the exhaustion that like even contemplating being that level of neat is because it feels like an optional lift.
Right.
But if it didn't feel optional, I think you'd just be like, oh, this is out of place. I'm going to get 3 wraps on the knuckles. No, we don't do that. Anyway, I have one last fun thing, which is a seed drill. So I was reading At Home by Bill Bryson, and he mentioned Jethro Tull, who invented the seed drill, which reduced needed seed, this is seed for like farming, from 3 to 4 bushels per acre to under 1, and boosted yield by up to 200%. And I think what's so cool about that, and the reason I wrote it down, is that it is so easy for whatever everyone's doing to become standard and just like, oh yeah, it takes this much seed, right? Instead of like that's a pretty significant, I mean, those results are crazy. Yeah. And it's so easy to just look at things. Yes, there's marginal improvements. Like instead of carrying the seed in buckets, what if we put it in a cart? What if we, I don't know. It's very cool that he like reimagined the whole process and took like a significant interest in improving things, not just would a filter of reducing waste catch this? I guess theoretically you could say, well, we're planting 100,000 seeds and we're only looking for 10,000 plants. So I guess in that sense you could say, well, what is preventing every seed from becoming a plant? Right, like I'm wondering, like, do the 8 lean wastes catch this and make you like force that kind of innovation? I don't know. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, interesting. Contemplative way to wrap it up. Thanks everyone for listening. We really enjoy this. Love being accountable to an audience to keep improving and
for sure
have a reason to think about this stuff and be up at 3 a.m. You can find me at lichen_MFG on Instagram, lichenprecision.com on the internet. You can find the pod at Incremental CI, and we have a Patreon.
We do. Also, it was kind of cool. A bunch of people tagged us. Unfortunately, I wasn't up on the Instagram enough to repost it, but quite a few folks were in the top like list of their top podcasts. Oh, so it's kind of cool.
Very cool.
I guess I forgot to mention that to you. Yeah, kind of cool. Anyway, you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com on the internet, and arda.cards on the internet and on Instagram. And we'll be back next week.
Adios.